everyone makes mistakes, even big-budget blockbuster movie makers. We'll show you some subtle slip-ups you might not have noticed in your favorite films. Plus, we'll reveal which Avengers Endgame editing mistake the special effects team is still beating themselves up over. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is a magical place filled with secrets, so naturally capturing it on film isn't easy. And one unfortunate cameraman managed to be slightly less subtle than one of the many friendly school-based ghosts in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. During the scene when the students practice dueling one another, you can see someone who's clearly not wearing an approved Hogwarts uniform and is holding on to a camera, not a wand. Even though the first Frozen movie was released all the way back in 2013, there are still plenty of Disney fans out there who can't just let it go. This film was a huge hit and won an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, but apparently the Oscar committee was willing to overlook one massive movie editing mistake that took place when Elsa sings the most notorious song in the entire movie. While Idina Menzel belts out "Let It Go," you can see Elsa's braid shift from running down her back to on top of her left arm. It's like her hair just phased through her arm entirely, and as far as we know, that's not one of Elsa's powers in the Frozen canon. It's hard to remember a time when superhero movies weren't all the rage, but the first Spider-Man movie is partially responsible for making the genre what it is today.
Yes, I can see that.
So we can forgive Sam Raimi for making a couple rather obvious errors when portraying the story of Peter Parker. During one scene, Spider-Man saves the day and his love Mary Jane by swinging her to safety using his webbing. But if you look closely, you can see that's definitely not actor Tobey Maguire or a person at all. It's clearly just a prop. And to make matters worse, Mary Jane's hair is blowing the wrong way compared to the direction they're swinging. Sorry, but you'll never be able to watch this scene the same way again. We're not here just to harp on the classics, because the modern Spider-Man movies aren't perfect either. Let's take a look at SpiderMan Homecoming and see Tom Holland as Spider-Man trying desperately to get a callback from his mentor/father figure, Tony Stark. When Spidey's on the phone, you can see the sun is setting, but it still has a long way to go before nightfall. Yet, the moment Spider-Man drops down to apprehend the thieves at the ATM, it's all of a sudden pitch black outside. These simple scene mistakes in it aren't as scary as a giant shape-shifting spider clown, so maybe that's why audience members didn't notice the first time around. When Beverly is in the bathroom at school, you can see she's holding a cigarette in her right hand when she extinguishes it against the side of the stall. Yet a moment later, when the camera looks down over the top of the stall, she's holding the unlit cigarette in her left hand. Another error takes place when Eddie falls down and breaks his arm after being frightened by Pennywise. When he hits the ground, you can see both his arms are totally fine, yet when he sits up, all of a sudden, one of them is horribly broken. Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle is a new spin on a classic movie, which involves a group of kids finding a video game instead of a board game. But when Anthony first picks up the console, you can see it only has 2 controllers. Yet when the kids decide to play the game, all of a sudden 2 more controllers have materialized out of nowhere. Finding out Thor and Loki have an estranged sister was definitely surprising when we saw Thor Ragnarok, and we watched those brothers transform into their more heroic-looking selves when she first confronted them. Thor summons a blast of lightning, which damages the earth at his feet when it strikes, and displaces a large amount of earth and grass. But then, the ground immediately healed and looks just like it did before. Things get a little bit weird in the movie Doctor Strange. Not only does the titular hero go from being a respected surgeon to a master of the mystic arts, but there's also a healthy amount of time travel mixed in just to make things a little more confusing. Or an unhealthy amount of time travel, it depends who you ask. At one point, Doctor Strange is getting used to his new handy cloak of levitation, with some fresh injuries from his confrontation with Caecilius. But somehow, only a moment later, he has a major wound on his forehead that wasn't there previously. Whenever he's in a scene, it's hard not to focus on the charismatic, eyeliner-clad Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. But if you pay attention to his motley crew of pirates, you might notice that one of them is not quite like the others. In this scene, you can see a crew member wearing a cowboy hat instead of a traditional pirate garb. Let's take a look at this mistake in the movie Justice League. And no, we aren't just talking about the fact that this film exists at all. The best of Earth's heroes can't even come close to Superman's strength.
I'm afraid of bugs and, guns and obnoxiously tall people.
So they try to revive our hero, and Aquaman submerges him while wearing his armor. When the camera moves to Cyborg, we can still see Aquaman in the background, but he's clearly not even wearing a shirt this time. Any way you look at it, Avengers Endgame was a massive success, grossing over $2.7 billion at the box office. But despite this, there's still one moment visual effects supervisor Matt Attikin is still kicking himself over, and it's something most of us probably didn't even notice. During the final battle, there's a moment where if you look closely, you can see Thanos' finger clipping through his glove. If you blinked, you may have missed it, and even if your eyes were wide open, it's still pretty difficult to spot. There's another Endgame error which is a little easier to see, and it takes place after Scott Lang suffers through having his delicious taco displaced. Smart Hulk comes by and offers to share, and you can clearly see him picking up 2 tacos with his giant Hulk hand. But after transferring them to Scott, only a single lone taco remains in Ant-Man's hand. In the movie Logan, the titular hero makes an unscheduled stop to help some horses that are running wild on the road. While Professor Xavier is trying to convince him to stop, he's sitting in the seat behind Logan. Yet when the car stops, he's on the passenger side of the car. Since his mobility is limited, it seems unlikely he would have changed his seat mid-trip, especially with the pandemonium caused by the horses. Wonder Woman has a lot of awesome powers, only a few of which have been established on the big screen. But based on this scene, the movie version of her character does seem to have the magic ability to keep her shoes clean. In the Wonder Woman movie, you see her running through trenches and across areas filled with dirt and mud. Yet even after all that, you can see her boots don't have a single smudge of dirt on them. I'd love that superpower. Wouldn't have to do washing ever again. Now, the biggest Avatar-related mistake isn't believing James Cameron when he says the second and third movies would be out shortly after the first was released. Jake and Neytiri managed to fall in love, despite the fact that she's a Na'vi and he's a human. Although the Na'vi are definitely humanoid, don't forget that they're also approximately 10 feet tall, while the average-sized man in the United States is just under 5'10". So when they finally meet in their true forms, it doesn't make sense that Jake's hand is able to perfectly cup Neytiri's face, when really, she should be much larger than him. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a fun-filled romp into the world of OSHA violations. But there's one moment in this whimsical children's movie we kind of feel bad for laughing at.
What kind of rubbish is that?
When all the kids gather in the candy shop, the proprietor sings a joyous tune while giving the kids a simply unreasonable amount of sweets with no clear method of how to bill them for their consumption. At one point, he pulls up a part of the counter to pass through, and you can see the piece of wood smack a little girl standing nearby. Whoops. Even before fans gave up on the franchise, it seems like the folks behind the scenes at Game of Thrones were over it too, since they continually left items like water bottles and Starbucks cups in important scenes. But a similar mistake also happened in the film Little Women, when TikTok user Madeline Rancourt noticed a water bottle looking conspicuously out of place. Hey, it was a reusable one, so at least this error is better for the environment. Cats was a disastrous movie adaptation of a much-beloved play, and needless to say, its theatrical run was less than successful. But the original version that hit theaters was even worse than the one most fans ended up seeing. It was a rough cut of the film, packed with errors like human hands being shown instead of feline ones. If you thought Cats was bad when you sat through it, just keep in mind it could have been worse. Whether you consider Miss Congeniality a classic movie or a guilty pleasure, there's one continuity error you may not have noticed. During the scene in which Cheryl wins the crown, Grace tries to take it from her for her own safety. But unsure of her intentions, Cheryl fights her off by hitting her with her bouquet. The bunch of flowers ends up losing all of its petals after being used to hit Grace. Yet moments later, the petals all miraculously returned. Isn't nature amazing? In Mean Girls, Katie misses the memo that Halloween is about looking cute. Her frightening costume doesn't exactly go over well with the plastics, and it's not any better received by her pals Janice and Damien. When they scream in horror, the popcorn they were eating goes flying. But when things calm down, the bowl is somehow refilled and the couch isn't totally covered in the stuff. There's a lot to look at in The Fifth Element, but one of the errors involves a pretty standard movie-making detail. When Leeloo is escaping, you can see her winding up to punch through the glass. But if you look at the glass closely, you can see markings to indicate where it's meant to break. Does the perfect movie really exist? Even the biggest budget flicks can be filled with mistakes, so tell us a few you've spotted in the comments below. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you don't make the mistake of missing out on the latest from Screen Rant. We'll see you next time.